I'm writing this as my girlfriend tells me the story, so these will be her words pretty much. My job is just to type and try not to screw up too much. When I was 12 years old, I spent the night with my best friend Carrie. We had big plans for our sleepover. We were planning to stay up all night, listen to music, play board games, and talk about boys. The usual things little girls do. Around 2 a.m. or so, after her parents were already sleeping, we decided that we were hungry. We knew that we had to be quiet so that we didn't wake them, so we tiptoed into the hallway from her room. As we made our way into the kitchen, we had to go through the dining room. Because we were so quiet, we heard a tapping noise. Immediately, we both knew that someone was tapping on the living room window. You could see into the living room from the dining room, so immediately our heads turned towards the living room. We could see a figure standing on the porch next to the window. Because of the way the porch light was illuminating the figure, it looked like a shadow. We thought the figure was Carrie's sister's boyfriend. The sister and boyfriend had been banned from seeing each other, and we assumed this was his weird way of getting her attention. We decided that either he would leave on his own, Tina, Carrie's sister, would see him, or Carrie's parents would wake up and run him off. We didn't want the last possibility to happen, because we had already been told to go to sleep more than once, and we knew we'd get in trouble for sneaking into the kitchen for food when we were supposed to be asleep. As we walked through the dining room, the figure kept tapping at the window. When he came into full view, we knew for sure it was a man, and we could tell he had a knife in his hand. The knife was what he was tapping with. Now, because this window had no shades, blinds, or curtains, we were sure he could see us as well. We both dropped to the floor and started crawling to the kitchen. When we made it to the kitchen, we literally sat in the middle of the kitchen floor, whispering about what we had just seen. We were both sure that we saw the same man with a knife. We knew we had to get to her parents' room as quickly as possible. To do this, we had to walk through the living room. We sat in the kitchen, trying to figure out how we were going to get there without him seeing us. We peeked around the kitchen wall, and could still see him standing on the front porch. We couldn't make it to her parents' room without him possibly seeing us. We knew we had to find a place with a door that would lock in case he came through the sliding glass door that currently had no lock on it, since the lock was broken. The sliding glass door was in the dining room, and right next to where we were. We decided to crawl back to her room. As we did, we heard the front door jiggling. We basically freaked. We crawled back to her room as fast as we could and locked the door. We crawled to her bedroom window that faced the street, so that we could see if he was still on the front porch. We didn't see him. We didn't hear tapping either. As we were watching from her window, we saw him leave her yard and start walking up the street towards the main highway. I could see the knife shimmering off the streetlights. It was a huge butcher's knife. When we realized he was leaving, we ran into her parents' room to tell them what happened. We told them what we had seen, and due to our overactive imaginations and hundreds of stories that had freaked us out before, they didn't believe us. We reluctantly went back to her bedroom and locked the door. We ended up sleeping on the floor, hidden by the bed from any windows in her room. The next morning was a Sunday. Carrie's dad always walked to the corner store up the street to get her paper, coffee, and some smokes. When he came back, he was empty-handed. He said the store was roped off with police tape, and it turned out the clerk in the store had been stabbed to death. I had something really scary happen to me when I was around 18 years old in the early 1990s. I was really into cars back then, and I liked working on my own cars, even though I'm a girl. I had a 1979 Z28 Camaro with T-tops, and in the summer, I would go cruising around with my friends looking for something to do. One evening while driving up and down Main Street in a neighboring city, I noticed a small red truck following us at a distance. I was with my friend Jenny, and I mentioned to her that I thought this truck could be following us. I pulled into the driveway of a fast food restaurant and noticed that the truck pulled into the restaurant 3 driveways back. I drove out in the other direction, and he did the same. Again, I pulled into another driveway, and the truck pulled in 3 driveways behind. I did this several times, and the truck kept following, always staying about 3 driveways back. Jenny and I decided that we would just head towards home, which was about 30 minutes away. We thought that the driver of the truck would just give up and let us go, but he didn't. He just kept following. It was now getting very late, and we were beginning to worry, as the truck had now been following us for about an hour. We didn't want to go home and have him follow us there, so I decided the best thing to do would be to drive to the nearest police station. I told Jenny what I planned on doing, and to my horror, she grabbed the steering wheel and pulled it, causing the car to veer sharply to the right. "What the hell are you doing?" I screamed at her. "You're gonna make us crash!" It was bad enough that I had to worry about the truck following us, but now I had to worry about my passenger freaking out and causing us to have an accident. "No, we can't go to the police," she insisted. It occurred to me right then that somehow she thought this was our fault. That somehow by just cruising around, she thought that we had done something to provoke this. I reluctantly drove away from the police station. We approached a bridge and were stopped by the red light on a one-way street. The truck was behind a car that was next to us. The car turned right, allowing the truck to pull forward. I looked over, and to my horror, this guy had stepped out of the truck and was standing next to the passenger side of my car with no pants on, and he was masturbating. This guy didn't have his pants down around his ankles. As a matter of fact, he had none on at all. I had the disturbing feeling that he probably didn't even have any with him this whole time that he had been following us. I hit the gas pedal and ran the red light going over the bridge. Somehow my friend didn't see what the guy had been doing just outside her window. When I told her, she just kept saying, "No way." "How the hell did you not see that?" I asked her in disbelief. It occurred to us that the guy would likely rape us if he had the chance. I drove up and down a few one-way streets, and back over the bridge and out into the country. He followed us for what seemed like forever, until we were finally able to lose him going really fast out in the middle of nowhere. We went home and tried to forget about it. For some reason, I never told my parents, and I'm not sure why. A few weeks later, I saw on the news that the police were looking for a guy in a small red truck. He was wanted for rape. They showed us his picture, and it resembled the guy that had followed us. I thought that their description of the truck was a little different from the one we had seen, but maybe not. I always wondered if it was him. I'm just glad we never had to find out. This creepy experience must have happened about a year ago now, around Halloween, and to this day, it still creeps me the fuck out. Me and my twin sister, Lauren, both 20 now, had moved into our first flat 3 months before this happened. Our parents helped us move into the flat, my dad hiring a van to get all of our stuff, and the whole family, including my older brother, Sam, who was visiting from England, helped us to move furniture and boxes into our flat. Our family helped us settle in, and luckily enough, our flat was actually next door to one of our dad's old friends, Danny, which was great, as we hadn't seen him and his wife in about 10 years. The neighborhood we live in, which is a smallish village about an hour or so from Glasgow in Scotland, is 99% of the time really quiet, and everybody around the area is really nice. But this one night, something wasn't quite right. Like I said already, we had only really got used to the area we were living in. But after what happened this one night, I'll always have my wits about me. It was a dark winter's night in late October or early in November. A Thursday, I think. Me and my sister decided to stay up until about 1:30 in the morning, as we sometimes did after a long week at college. We'd stay up drinking, stuffing our faces, and talking about random stuff like acting, the subject we were both studying. Motorbikes, guys, and some bitching were on the list too, just like any normal young woman would do. We then decided to put the lights out and go to bed as we had grown tired. I'd do the normal nightly routine, like check everything was turned off and that the door was locked, which it was, thankfully, as a few nights previously I had forgotten to lock it, so we both went to bed and fell asleep as usual. Just to set the layout of the flat, me and my sister were on the first floor, above an old woman named Betty, who was rather lovely, but we didn't get to see her very often. My bedroom is right next to the porch and the front door, and our bedroom window looks out onto the street. It was about 4 a.m. when we awoke to a loud knocking at our door. I was expecting a parcel the next day, so initially I thought it would be a postman, but that's when I checked at the time on my phone, which I usually leave on in case of emergencies, and it was 4:30 a.m. Still being tired and disoriented, I realized it was far too dark out to be about 10 a.m. when the postman usually came, even though the mornings were much darker now during the winter months. The banging on the door lasted what felt about 20 minutes, but it was probably less. Me and my sister were too scared to move from our beds, only whispering quietly to each other to just ignore the banging on the door. Neither of us were very comfortable about answering the door to a stranger knocking at an ungodly hour. I don't usually answer the door to strangers, or even mobile numbers I don't recognize. The banging stopped suddenly, and I heard heavy footsteps descend down the outside stairs next to the wall near my head. Everything fell silent for a few minutes, so I tried to settle back down, but my adrenaline was going crazy. I could feel my legs shaking, and I was so nervous about whoever it was outside. There was no way I was getting back to sleep. Then, I saw the flashing of a torch through our bedroom window. It flashed at least 3 times, but maybe more. It then stopped. I heard what sounded like a man talking on the phone to someone, or having a conversation with someone outside. They sounded a bit agitated and angry. I didn't look outside our bedroom window, in case the man saw me, but a few minutes later, I heard the rumbling of a car engine below me, so I then assumed that he came in his car. His voice became increasingly explosive, as I became more and more scared. It got to the point where I was about to phone the police, but then I heard the man opening his car door and leaving swiftly along the street. I don't know who the man was or what he wanted, but I didn't sleep at all that night, and for the next few days after that, every single noise would give me a fright. I was scared that whoever it was going to come back. The story doesn't end there. In the end, I thought that it was someone with the wrong address, or maybe just a drunk guy. But about a week later, we got a knock at the door about 6:30 in the evening, which was unusual for a quiet area, and neither me or my sister were expecting any mail packages or shopping to be delivered, so I opened the door to whoever had knocked. Initially, I thought it was our neighbor, as he had been around once before to see how we were settling in, but not this time. It was a woman who was dressed in a suit and looked very professional. Her hair was up in a tight bun, and she was holding a clipboard. I was a bit anxious and wondered who the hell this person was. I looked down at her name badge, but I can't quite recall her name now. Let's call her Molly. Molly said she worked for the criminal courts and was looking for a guy, who we'll call Thomas, who had previously been a tenant at this flat before we moved in a few months before. Molly mentioned something to do with money, but the visit was so vague I don't really remember what she said. She asked if the man lived here, and I said no, just me and my sister. She asked when we moved in and what letting agency we were with, but I think it was to confirm that we did live here. She seemed nice enough, got what she wanted, and left, so I'm guessing money is the reason why the creepy guy turned up a few nights previously banging loudly on our door. I'm so glad I didn't answer the door that night, and then I made sure it was locked. Fuck knows what would have happened if he thought that we were the man he and the courts were looking for. I'm happy to say since then, we have had no further disturbances in our flat, but it still gives me the chills thinking about it. I'm a 26-year-old female who's about 5'0" and generally harmless looking. I have no idea what it is about being seemingly harmless, but it tends to attract a whole array of bad news. Don't believe me? Go ask a soft-spoken, tiny girl who gives you the first impression of, "Isn't she just adorable?" And more than likely, she'll have enough stories to make you worry about your sanity. This is compounded by my overall attitude of, "I'll be a sugar, rainbows, and sunshine right up until you give me a reason not to" kind of girl. A job in retail makes the whole mess about as fun as bamboo splinters under your fingernails. Whoever came up with the idea that the customer is always right needs to be shot, resurrected, and shot again. That said, I'll do anything within the limits of my job to help a customer. I like helping customers out. Most retail workers do. A little lesson to be had here for those who have never worked in a service-based company is that most of the employees want to help you. Let them, and you'll both walk away from the encounter in a much better frame of mind. If they don't, you should ask yourself if it's a situation beyond their control. If the answer is even anywhere close to it might be, let them off the hook. I've seen too many retail employees get a look of dread on their face because something goes wrong, as I myself am out being a customer. It bothers me every single time because I know what it's like to think, great, now I'm going to get yelled at and called names for something that isn't my fault, or if they're mad enough they might even call in about me and then tell my boss. And you know what said employee can do about it? Nothing. Sit there and take it while apologizing for your inconvenience. I work as an overnight supervisor to a 24-hour drugstore. We get plenty of creepy people in, being a fair-sized city with only 2 24-hour pharmacies in town. I have some really weird stories. The evening of this particular incident had me working on a Saturday night with 2 other front-end employees. Saturday nights mean ad tags. We overnighters, the few, the lucky, are the ones stuck with these joyful regulars. Some regular meth heads and drunks, and the occasional sick person or person with a sick loved one at home. Most intoxicated people are in and out like a flash, but I've noticed the more out of their wits they are, the higher the potential for creepy is. So you learn to watch the ones with nervous twitches. It was about 1:30 a.m. when this taller, wiry man walked into my store. His dark brown hair was cropped pretty short, and he was dressed fairly casually. I didn't even realize his presence in the store until the cashier for the night, Daniel, came up to me and muttered something about the weird guy standing around the front of the store. Daniel is middle-aged, but mischievous and crotchety are 2 very apt descriptions of him. You never quite know when he's stirring the pot, so I searched the guy down to see what was bothering Daniel. I had been thinking it was more than likely he'd noticed something strange about the guy and was worried about shoplifting. This would not be the first or last time his so-called shoplifter turned out to be some poor, exhausted father or husband sent out to get cold medicine. I found him pacing along the front wall and asked if he needed any help in my cheeriest customer service voice. The moment he turned around, I froze. This man radiated subdued violence. It surrounded him like an aura of menace. I couldn't pinpoint what was bothering me. The weirdly still expression, maybe? Or the way he was standing? He was unnaturally tense during my whole experience with him, like he was ready to go off at the first provocation. Truthfully, I still haven't quite figured it out, but he was just off enough to send up red flags just looking at him. Immediately uncomfortable, I was all too happy when he muttered,
"No, I'm, just looking."
I never have figured out how to gracefully exit the situation when the customer has nothing left to say to you, but still stands there, staring, which feels almost expectant, even if it's not. After a minute or so of avoiding meeting his eyes, I told him my usual line of, "Alright, well, let us know if you need anything." I backed into the aisle I'd emerged from and hurried off to busy myself with more ad tags. Daniel could keep an eye on him if he felt like it. The dude was scary, and I was the only female on shift. No thank you, they don't pay me enough for this. It's not long before I start to feel like I'm being watched, and creepy suspect number 1 is lurking at the top of the aisle, staring. I finish all the tags in line for that aisle, and I'm relieved when I have to move across the store for others in a different section. Again, a few moments pass, and that weird prickly feeling hits me, and he's at the end of the aisle, staring right back at me. I ask for the second time if I can help him with anything, and he pretends he's busy with some vitamins he picked up at random. He gave a creepy grin, and told me that he was just looking. Yeah, sure. I bet. This continues for another half hour or so, until I find myself heading up to the front to ring up a customer. I had no idea where Daniel was, but it didn't matter. I was grateful for the distraction. That was, until I noticed the creeper following me up to the register, still staring. I conducted the transaction as quickly as possible, and after a few too many nervous glances in my creeper's direction, the customer took off like someone had lit him on fire. I decided to go outside for my lunch break. It was cold, and I thought maybe, since Mr. Creeper didn't have a particularly warm-looking coat, he'd just leave me alone. I searched out one of my coworkers and let them know my intentions, clocked out, and stepped outside and into my car. Now normally I try to avoid smoking in my car. I've never liked the way it stinks up a car, but desperate times, desperate measures. I locked the car doors and rolled down the window just far enough to fit my cigarette through to ash it. I picked up a book, turned to the page I left off on, and settled in. A few paragraphs later, I heard someone banging on my window. I jumped up and looked. Guess who? That's right, Mr. Creepy. He grinned at me in what I'm sure was supposed to be a sheepish fashion, but it came off more like Norman Bates, if you know what I mean. I asked him again if I could help him, and he said he'd been looking for something in particular that he'd like my help with. I told him firmly that there were 2 other employees in the store that would have to help him. I was off the clock. He frowned, and after a moment of me pointedly ignoring him in favor of tensely not being able to concentrate on my book, he went back inside. My lunch break ended, and I still hadn't seen him come back out. I hurried inside, clocked in, and called the other shift supervisor, Mark, into the office. I explained the situation and asked him if he could go deal with the dude. Mark sighed, nodded, and went to talk to the guy. I busied myself in the office with some training sessions I had been putting off for a while. Mark came back into the office wearing a very bewildered look. I raised an eyebrow and he sat down.
That guy was really weird.
Weird's not quite the adjective I'd use. What did he say?
He wanted to talk to you again. I told him you had other things you needed to be doing, but I'd be happy to help him. That agitated him. You know, you thought he was freaky beforehand.
He visibly shuddered, and I raised an eyebrow again.
He asked if I knew what time you got off work or where you lived.
Like, what the fuck?
Exactly. I told him we were legally obligated not to share such information, and that if he wasn't going to buy something, he needed to leave. And then he just left. I followed him out just in case. He was looking around his car until he noticed I had followed, then he got back in his car and left.
I decided I wasn't going to stick around to see if he was going to come back, and noped out of the rest of my shift. Shortly after, my store set up a guard contract with the local police department, and I haven't seen him since. Hey guys, Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you all for watching the video, especially if you made it to the end. If you liked the video, please feel free to like and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest content on the channel. If you have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave a comment below and tell me what I can do to improve, because I'm always looking to provide you guys with better and better content. Also, if you have any stories you'd like me to read or any stories that you want to send in that are your personal stories, please feel free to send them to either my Facebook, Twitter, or my Gmail account. All of them are in the description of the video below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.